a non-school emergency call, I feel like we could take people off.
Okay, we're live now, so yes, you can direct it. It's up and running right now. So it should be linked through the board. It should be, if they go to the board on the district website, there should be a thing that says watch live. Yeah. 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 Yep. Or they can, they can go to YouTube and just search Easton Area School District reopening of schools, and it'll come up.
Tried this morning to up it to 1,000, but Zoom is going to work on it.
It's such an interesting, yes.
Yeah.
As long as we don't do film.
Mm-hmm.
Film premises still was one that has to that. Yeah. Film that comes to make some paper.
Oh, okay.
Other than that, it's usually a handful of employees.
She said go with the call.
Go with the call? English, Spanish, just give me 5 minutes.
Yeah, Pleasant Valley, most, the Pleasant administrators, convenience groups. Okay. There were some topics that involved people.
I couldn't make out what they were saying. Oh. Yep, she's doing it right now. She said it'll be done in 3 minutes. Oh, geez. That's great.
Since nobody's here, I can actually watch it in my office. So nobody has to.
Okay. All right, let us know if you need anything.
Yeah, that's what I intended to do, but then when I put it down, I thought, well, I don't know if I was going to put it on. And
Since Josh is in his office, and he didn't come back, he wasn't going to be back in time. Guess I should stay here just in case of public person.
frustrated by not being able to get on.
Hey, Josh. What? I mean, drive.
Oh, okay, all right, okay, I'm okay, sounds good.
Good evening, everyone. We are aware that there is a maximum. Anybody who is on the Zoom is able to receive the same information if you go to YouTube. If you go to YouTube via the Board Docs webpage, that gives you a link, and everyone will receive the same exact information watching it via Zoom or via YouTube, since this is an informational meeting.
Josh said he
Good. Yeah, I'm in. I'm gonna go back to my office, but if they need me for something, I can come out.
For those of you who are following this information session, please note that the information today will be displayed on YouTube as it is.
Good evening, everyone. We are about to get started. We are just in the process of unmuting our board members. So if you just give us a few more minutes, we'll get the presentation started. a little time to get the board and administrators in, and we're in the process of unmuting them, and we can get the presentation started this evening. So thank you everyone who's joined us this evening, and thank you to the board members. We're going to get started. To say that we are navigating uncharted waters is a dramatic understatement at this time. None of us have been here before, and the responsibility laid at our feet weighs heavily on our minds. We understand the implications and consequences of our decisions and have engaged in a thoughtful, research-based process to get us to this point of the conversation. The plan we are presenting tonight is a blueprint for opening our schools that's been created in collaboration with PDE, the CDC, our local health officials, and community partners. As you'll see this evening, the pandemic team included doctors, nurses, teachers, and school administrators. This team has remained faithful to the recommendations issued, including the most recent updated health guidance for school leaders that was issued by PDE and the Department of Health at 3:10 p.m. today. The presentation you are about to see has been constantly revised, literally until a few minutes before tonight's meeting began. We have openly accepted any and all feedback from our community. What we have learned from the staff and community surveys, as well as individuals reaching out to us via email, is that there is no one correct answer to the question, how do we restart schools in the fall? Our community is divided, our employees are divided, the so-called experts are divided. Many parents have expressed the need to return to work. Many faculty and staff have expressed concerns regarding their health as well as the health of their students. While some parents have expressed concerns about their children having to wear masks, other parents have expressed concerns about students around their children not wearing masks. The plan being presented this evening provides different scenarios based on up-to-date circumstances. As I've stated, those circumstances are changing rapidly, and the plan allows us to pivot quickly as those circumstances evolve. When we began writing this plan just a week and a half or so ago, there was a very different outlook for opening schools than the one that exists today. It will change by next week. It will certainly change by August 31st. In fact, just yesterday, the governor announced he'd be willing to shut down schools again if cases continue to rise. That comes after he stated earlier this summer that we could not afford to shut down again. The goal of our plan today and moving forward is to strike a balance between mitigation and best practices. You're going to hear that multiple times tonight throughout the presentation. The goal is to strike the correct balance between educational best practices for our students and the mitigation of a pandemic. First and foremost, we are educators. Educational experts agree that best practices include students being in school with their teachers. I believe strongly that students are best served when they are in school with their teachers. I know that the adults working in this district are 100% committed to doing what is best for our students. But we have to do so in a way that will be responsible and remain attentive to the needs of our community. Tonight's presentation is designed to begin the discussion of reopening schools, to begin the discussion. After the presentation, community members will be instructed on how to ask questions, make suggestions, and provide feedback over the next several weeks. The pandemic team would like adequate time to consult with our medical experts in order to clearly and consistently answer all of your questions and all the questions generated this evening and beyond. The community will be able to continue to ask questions over the next several weeks and can expect answers to those questions in a timely manner. It's important for us to continue to communicate with all of you, so we will be scheduling a follow-up presentation and a question and answer session for the week of August 3rd through the 7th. Sometime during that week, the date is yet to be established. Trying to answer everyone's questions tonight would be counterproductive, extremely time-consuming, and would lead to a lot of inconsistencies. Again, we're at 1,000 participants. So we do ask the community's patience as we utilize our online process for answering your questions beyond this evening's presentation. If questions do remain unanswered by the time we have our next presentation, we will absolutely build in the opportunity for the audience to ask questions live at that meeting. At this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mrs. Amelie.
Thank you, Mr. Cabrado. I wanted to start this presentation by sharing with the community the process that we embarked upon beginning in June. We formed a pandemic team which consisted of administrators, teachers, our certified school nurses, community partners, parents, and community health professionals. We met as a team on a weekly basis, and we've done so for the better part of 2 months now. But beyond that, we also formulated 16 work groups, and those were formed around those specific plan requirements of the plan that we must submit to PDE prior to bringing our students back. The work groups, while there were specific plan requirements, there were really some overarching concepts that they tackled: social distancing, health protocols for students and staff, and cleaning and sanitizing, professional development. And those were really the overarching concepts that our work groups really tackled. And a lot of our presentation is dedicated to the work that they're able to put forth on this day. And again, to just state what Mr. Cabrado said, this is an ever-changing landscape. So our work groups will continue this work. We will continue to utilize the feedback that we get after this evening's presentation, and that will only continue to shape the ultimate plan that we move forward with. We had what you could call a test case with both our athletic program and also our Easton Area High School marching band, both of which, in order to bring students back safely starting on July 6th, both of which had to have a health and safety plan of their own. So we were in consultation on a daily basis, and we've really been able to learn from the process that they went through in order to both build that plan, but then also revise that plan in the face of what they've encountered over the last 2 weeks of having students back on campus in the small groups that they have them there in. Another part of our process that was extremely important to the pandemic team was to survey our stakeholder groups. As of this morning, we received 3,854 parent and guardian responses and 830 staff responses. That is a huge response rate, and that just speaks to the point here that people care about having a voice. We want to hear your voice, and we want to make sure that the voice that you have is incorporated into our ultimate plan. So we're in a situation that none of us have ever been in, but we want to continue to collect those survey responses, and we also want to continue to collect your feedback after learning about this evening's presentation. So that is a very important part to our overall process. So part of the pandemic team, we did have expertise from the field. We looked to the people in the field to really leverage their knowledge base, because admittedly, we're educators. We aren't public health officials by any stretch, so we really needed to make sure that we were reliant on our community health officials. We worked with St. Luke's University Health Network, and we had a representative on our pandemic team. Our certified school nurses have been invaluable through this process, in addition to our school physician, who we've regularly consulted with to make sure that the plan we're putting forth isn't just what's educationally best for kids, but also what's best for our community. We've been guided by the recommendations of the CDC, the governor, the Department of Ed, and the Department of Health. And as Mr. Pipperato said, receiving guidance again from the Secretary of Education today at 3 o'clock, we will continue to evolve the plan based on all the recommendations that we receive from those entities. Also, I think it's important to mention that collectively around the Lehigh Valley, through our intermediate unit, we've been in collaboration with local school districts. Superintendents are talking, people of like positions are talking, and while every district's plan is not going to look the same, because it's going to be responsive to their own respective communities, we are in communication with one another to make sure that we are all on the same page with what we're putting forth, because this is such an unknown for all of us. So looking at our goals, Mr. Pipperato led with that. I think it's important to also re-highlight those. This is what drove us. These are two very clear goals and pretty simplistic goals. We wanted to provide a framework that we can adapt and be flexible within as we continue to receive new guidance. And we wanted to strike a balance between the mitigation steps during a pandemic and the educational best practices that we are aware of. What you'll see here tonight is a framework. We will continue to develop the how based on the guidance that we receive, but we're sharing with you our framework as a result of where we stand today on July 16th. We don't have all the answers. We admit we don't have all the answers. And truthfully, every question that is answered really generates additional questions that need to then be answered as well. So we will continue to put forth the best plan that we can, knowing that those are the two goals that we are focused on. So I will share with you our proposed schedule. Following this slide, we will go into each of these phases and break them down in a much more detailed process. But this is just kind of an overarching visual to show you the proposed schedule that we've devised here that allows us flexibility within this framework. So you'll see that if Northampton County is in either red or yellow, we as a school district, our red or yellow phase in response to that, we are going to be at 100% remote learning in either of those circumstances. So the phase might be color coded differently, but really the ultimate schedule, it looks the same. It's 100% remote learning. Once you get into the green phase, we know that all greens are really not created equally. So essentially, we have 4 phases within green that allows us a bit of flexibility to be responsive to the certain circumstances that we here in our community are experiencing at any given point. Green phase 1 would put us into a place where students in grades K through 12 are on a hybrid rotational schedule. What that means will be explained in the next slide, but green phase 1 essentially puts us in a hybrid model. Green phase 2, a hybrid model, is both in-person and remote learning. Green phase 2, we are looking at grades 6 through 12 being in that hybrid rotational schedule, whereas grades K through 5, all students would be attending in-person instruction from 8:45 a.m., their current start time, to 1:30 p.m. All LAMP courses, that's library, art, music, and physical education, those would be delivered remotely. That's highlighted on this slide because that is here as we sit tonight, that is what we're targeting for our opening on August 31st. Again, knowing that that is a month and a half away from where we are right now, there is a lot that we will learn between now and then that could take us in any different direction. But as we sit here on July 16th, we are proposing to start in green phase 2. Green phase 3, that's a schedule where all of our K-12 students are attending in-person instruction, but they're doing so on a modified schedule. So similar to in green phase 2, where our elementary students are in a condensed day, we'd be looking at a modified condensed day for all of our secondary students as well. We don't have the times delineated here on this schedule because, quite truthfully, we don't anticipate this in the foreseeable future. We don't anticipate us being in green phase 3 right now. And truthfully, this would impact our transportation system. Just today, we received guidance about transportation that we had not received previously. So before we would set forth the actual times on green phase 3, we really need to have a better idea of what our restrictions and what the guidelines are that are dictating us to getting to that place. Again, as I stated, this is not a place where we envision ourselves on August 31st, and that'll allow us the time to really assess what those timeframes would be if we were to enter into green phase 3. Green phase 4 is back to normal. That is what it was prior to March 13th. So green phase 4 means that the high school students are attending from 7:20 to 2:20, etc. Throughout our system, because all of our students are in-person instruction and all of our students are following the schedule that they did at the start of last school year. So that provides just kind of a 30,000-foot look at what the schedule is, and Mr. Cuck and Ms. Piazza are going to go into detail as we move forward into defining what each of those phases looks like.
Thank you, Alyssa. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to point out and highlight a few things to elaborate on what Mrs. Amelie discussed regarding the red and the yellow phases for the Easton Area School District for reopening. Should the county be in red or yellow, there will be a similar structure in terms of the schedule, and it will be 100% remote. One of the things I'd like to highlight with this remote schedule is it will be very different from the asynchronous and open nature, so to speak, of what we witnessed in the spring with our remote instruction. What some of the things that you'll see in terms of changes is more synchronous opportunities for teachers to connect directly with students, typically on a daily basis, and assignments and classwork being done on the daily basis instead of something assigned for the week. There'll also be daily check-ins that will occur to allow student and teachers to interact with each other on a more consistent basis and have those check-ins. Looking ahead at the next phase in terms of green, I'm going to turn over to Mrs. Piazza to talk about the K-5, and I will then come back to discuss the 6 through 12 model.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone. So as Mrs. Amelie and everyone before me had mentioned, first thing is very important for us to continue to reiterate that this is a plan that will ebb and flow based on our gained knowledge from all the experts who we are collaborating with and the phases of the disease. In the green phase, as Mrs. Amelie alluded to, we do have 4 different phases there. We anticipate that we will spend most of our time in phases 1 or 2 if we are in a green phase. So green phase 1 has the elementary students coming on a modified hybrid schedule, which means that half of our students will come Monday and Tuesday for in-person instruction with a normal 8:45 to 3:25 day. The other half of our students will come on a Thursday-Friday schedule, again for in-person instruction. That Wednesday will be utilized to not only deep clean our buildings, but those days will be kept as remote days. So if your student is not in face-to-face learning, the other 3 days of the week will be considered remote or hybrid learning with our digital platforms. Throughout that time, they will receive some synchronous and some asynchronous, so some live and some pre-recorded instruction with expectations and delivery on how to submit work or how to proceed through the day. So I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Cuck to talk about secondary.
Right, and as Ms. Piazza mentioned, families can look for in the hybrid or the remote model when those days are occurring, as well as the red and yellow, to see Seesaw and Google Classroom as the primary platforms for learning management, and Zoom as the primary use for that in-person contact, as we are this evening during the board meeting. The 6 to 12 students under green phase 1 will be split by last names. That's grades 6 through 12. Students with the last names A through K will attend Monday and Tuesday in person. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday will be remote for those students. Students with the last names L through Z will attend Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday remotely, and will spend Thursday and Friday in person. As Mrs. Piazza mentioned, and I alluded to before regarding Google Classroom, is that students on a daily basis will be checking in either in person or remotely to their classroom to receive their lesson for that day and any follow-up questions that they may have will be able to be answered by their teacher.
If you want to go to green phase 2, so green phase 2, which is our targeted phase, again, depending on where all of our guidance leads us between now and the start of the school year, for our elementary students, that does bring our students back to school in total, their entire homeroom to come back to school for in-person instruction. That day would be a truncated day, meaning that they would start at 8:45 or their normal start time, but be dismissed at 1:30. Within the confines of that day, we will be providing their core curriculum, and most of their LAMP or their library, art, music, phys ed curriculum will then be delivered remotely, mostly through an asynchronous or an offline process that kids will access in their evening, after school hours. During the day while kids are here, we are going to mitigate the amount of time or lessen the amount of time that students are mixing with other homerooms or in a common place with other homerooms. So predominantly, once your students arrive to school, they will enter into their homeroom classroom and remain there for the majority of the day. Students will receive lunch here at school prior to coming home, and they will also receive a recess time, a break when weather permits outside, and if not, a break within the school confines, just to be able to decompress, let off a little steam, as we would during a typical learning schedule. But the important part here, and why we are targeting this area for elementary, is again not without great consideration for all of the guidances that we have been securing through our local, state, and federal resources, as well as through the American Pediatric Association giving guidance regarding our youngest students as well. And we are very cognizant of the fact that safety is paramount, and we want to make sure that that is, top of our list as we are considering what stages to bring students back and teachers back into our buildings. But we also know that, in-person education is paramount to the growth and well-being of our students. So we need to make sure that we are striking those safe balances. And if at all possible, we do want to get our students here in person as frequently as we possibly can. So in green phase 2 at the elementary level, we will be looking to bring back all students 5 days a week for in-person instruction for their core instruction and remote instruction for their specialty areas, with lunch and recess being accommodated throughout that day. Mr. Cuck?
Yeah, one of the reasons we want to highlight, the rationale in terms of the targeting phase, as Mrs. Piazza mentioned, in terms of keeping those students, at the secondary level, we obviously want to try to get that in person more frequently as well, but simply the size of our buildings will not allow us to keep any of those social distancing measures in place. 2,100 students in the middle school and 2,850 students in the high school. It simply will not be possible to keep up with those guidelines until we have a better handle on the virus, so to speak. So there's not much a change in green phase 2 for the secondary level. In fact, there's no change. Students' last names A to K are a Monday, Tuesday in person. Remote for those students L through Z on the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then there's a flip-flop. And so we just want to make sure we arrived at this as a committee. And the reason for the K to 5 versus the 6 through 12 is simply the sheer size of the buildings and the number of students who are going to be attending there on a daily basis. Just extremely difficult to manage at the secondary levels, and not so much particularly in the elementary buildings. The secondary schedule also allows us to do those deep cleans on those Wednesdays. So we have one group of students on Monday and Tuesday and a completely different group of students on a Thursday and Friday. Allows us to keep up with the CDC guidelines regarding cleaning, which you'll hear later on in the presentation, some of those specifics. So I'll move on to the last two phases, as Ms. Emili mentioned. phases that we're not quite sure if we're going to be getting to, but I'm going to turn it back over to my partner, Mrs. Piazza.
Okay, as we look at green phase 3 and green phase 4, again, I will reiterate that we don't necessarily anticipate, we are hopeful, and look forward to the days that we can be, back to some sort of normalcy, but it is unlikely that we will see these two phases this year. But should we be in green phase 3, as Mr. Cuck said about green phase 2 for the secondary students, not much will change in terms of elementary students for green phase 3. Our elementary students will still come to school with their entire class Monday through Friday on a truncated schedule, with their LAMP areas being taught remotely. Before I turn it back to I'll turn to green phase 4, but before I do that, I was remiss in stating on green phase 1 for our elementary students, while the secondary is splitting their school days by alphabet, the elementary levels will not be doing it by alphabet, just by the way that class schedules are built. So we will be splitting each homeroom so that there are equal amounts, or as close to equal amounts, of students in group 1 as there are in group 2, and we will be paying particular attention to sibling family basis within our elementary schools. Thank you for going back. If you could move forward back to green phase 4, thank you. Green phase 4 really does not require much conversation here beyond what Mrs. Amelia had already spoken to. Green phase 4 is really pre-pandemic, and all of our students would come back at their regularly scheduled day, as we did prior to the pandemic, and receive all instruction in school, again, as we did previously. Mr. Cuck, if you want to elaborate on anything there?
No, I think it's pretty clear based upon what you said where those two schedules land. Just to give a brief overview, there's probably some students out there and parents who are very familiar with the secondary schedules, but looking at your child's schedule, it won't look much different than it has in previous years in terms of defining the class periods throughout the course of the day, the instructor in the classroom. The only difference will be that either they're in person on that Monday or Tuesday, or they're in person on those Thursdays and Fridays. The other times they're going to be learning remotely, and the schedule will still follow that typical bell schedule that's been provided. So I hope that gives a little clarity, or at least another image in your mind of what that would look like on a weekly basis for each of those secondary students. Mrs. Piazza?
Okay, you can turn to the next slide, please. Okay, so as we're talking about coming back to school in person, whether that be your 5 days a week or 2 days a week, there are things that we are going to ask that students have available to them, or we will make it available for them. You may have seen in some of our previous board meetings that our board was generous enough to approve a K-12 one-to-one initiative, so we will have iPads for all of our students in grades K through grades 12. That being said, there will be an expectation that our students take their iPad home nightly or daily, and that they charge them each evening. We are going to ask that regardless of whether the teacher is assigning work on the iPad for their evening work, if they were in face-to-face instruction, let the iPad go home for a lot of reasons, but one of the largest reasons is should we be shut down on a dime like we were this past spring, the students will have their materials home with them. So again, all students will be issued an iPad. All students will ask to carry that back and forth daily. We will ask our students to charge them nightly. We're going to ask that you leave your chargers at home so that you have access to charge them nightly and don't have to worry about the students bringing that back and forth. In addition, we will certainly encourage our students to bring hand sanitizer with them if they feel so inclined. We will have hand sanitizer and washing stations throughout our buildings. But if students feel most comfortable bringing their own personal size bottle, they're welcome to do that as well. We are also encouraging all students to bring their own face mask or face shield. Again, if a student comes to school and does not have access to a face mask, we will provide that. In addition, because we want to, again, be cognizant of the amount of time kids spend in those common areas, and being cognizant of the fact of multiple people touching a water fountain for drinking purposes. We are going to encourage that students at all levels, K through 12, bring a water bottle with them so they have ample opportunity to hydrate throughout the day. And most certainly, if they need to refill the bottle, we feel more comfortable refilling a bottle than we do have students, to bring their face directly to the water supply. In addition to that, all the school supplies that we typically would supply a student, pencil, paper, crayon, scissors, whatever that may look like on the, at the school level in which your student attends, will be provided by the district. And in fact, at the elementary level in particular, I'm going to discourage kids from bringing extra trinkets from home, so that we, again, can keep as much of the social distancing and not have to worry about tripping over extra supplies within the classroom. So we will supply the students with the academic tools that they need, and we encourage you to provide any of the safety tools that you feel appropriate for your own student. Thank you. You can go to the next slide.
Mike, if I could just jump in here. When we talk about the schedule, two things that I was remiss in mentioning are that we are still focused on an August 31st start date. That is our board approved school calendar, and that remains the start date regardless of the phase that we're in. And also our determination of moving from one phase to another phase, that would be made based on the collective expertise of the pandemic team themselves. We have a lot of different perspectives and a lot of expertise on that team, so that would be a decision that we would make collectively. Ultimately, the superintendent obviously having that decision-making ability, but it would be done collaboratively in most cases. And certainly, if the governor issues a warning, we would have to heed that. But if we were just moving from one phase to another, we would be doing that based on collective expertise. So thank you. I was remiss in not mentioning that. So thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, and thank you, Tracy. Looking at the next slide, a big focus of several of our work groups that Ms. Gazza and I ran dealt with the social distancing protocols. And as previously mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, was some very explicit recommendations from the Department of Health as well as Department of Education collaboratively, and most, if not all, of the protocols that our groups have created that you can see in front of you right now are following those specific guidelines. So we are definitely on the right page. As mentioned previously in the plan as well, in terms of this is what we are going to be doing, we do have to work. Protocols are the maximum or the minimum rather guidelines and expectations, and each of the buildings then will have to define exactly what some of these pieces look like so it can be communicated to the staff, students, and families as well. Many will be consistent with one another, but simply because the size of classrooms, the size of buildings, entranceways, cafeteria areas are all different within our schools. Some of the distancing will look a little different, not in terms of the distance in feet, but in terms of some of the procedures that we'll be needing to follow. So looking closely at the classroom there in front of you, students will stay within their designated work areas. It's going to be strongly encouraged, and routines will be established in the classroom. It's going to take a lot of learning for all of us when we get back into the thick of things in August. Desks and tables will be spread out no less than 3 feet apart, but we're aiming for 6 feet in most of our classrooms. Procedures for moving about the classroom will also be explicitly taught. So, the idea of getting up to do this and getting up to do that and moving around the classroom, all of that will be done with the mask. And when it's going to be done, there'll be protocols for doing that during the course of the class period. In terms of our hallways and stairwells will be labeled as one direction when we can do that. If not, they'll be split evenly down to one side, and there'll be a staggered movement of students throughout the building. Schedules will also be adjusted to limit the number of students. We also have in our schedule, particularly at the secondary level, half of the students, which is a big change. If any person attends or works at Easton Area High School knows, anytime the seniors seniors are out, or even the freshmen are out, or there's a large group of students out, it's very noticeable how the hallways are less condensed and there's less traffic traveling to and from each of those classes during that time period. Looking at our common areas, the frequency of which students need to gather in the common areas are going to be limited. And the connection that you have with your fellow classmates. But at this point in time, given the conditions that we have, we're going to try to limit that as best we can at the secondary level, as well as the elementary level, in terms of very little movement with those students and under the direction of their homeroom teachers during the course of the school day. Physical distancing, between individuals. So when we're talking about moving from one classroom to another, the 6 foot is what we are aiming for at all times, and this is what we're going to encourage students to do, and the procedures we're going to follow through with once school begins. Looking at our cafeterias, spent a lot of time talking about this and looked at that PE guidance. Students will sit on one side of the table with empty seats between each student. We're aiming for that 6 foot of distance between each, all facing the same direction. Other large spaces in the building will also be identified to allow for that to occur, so that we have enough space. The cafeteria, for example, at the high school or even at the middle school, with students seated one direction, 6 foot apart, we will not be able to have all of those students in one location. So we will be looking at other satellite areas where food will be served so that we can maintain that distance during the times of which students are eating. Recess and PE was a separate work group that Ms. Gaza and I ran, and we spent a lot of time dialoguing the importance of both of these entities. Only one class will be in the learning space at one time, or one play area if we're talking about recess. Each teacher will supervise his or her own classroom, or group of students rather. Outside spaces will be used when possible. I think this is a great opportunity for us to use the outdoors a lot more than we've had previously, but to get kids outdoors and outdoor spaces. And so that doesn't only include recess and PE, but that also includes other instructional activities that we may be able to move outside, so we can keep that 6 foot of social distancing and allow students to remove those masks throughout the course of the school day. Activities in PE and recess also will be consistent with non-contact movement. So, we talked about a lot of sports using their feet, the lack of using equipment, the same equipment period after period, and the limited amount of contact that we're going to have will be the focus of revising that curriculum to make sure students are active, but they're not putting themselves at a greater risk. And then last but certainly not least is buses. It's made the news quite frequently, whether or not schools are going to be able to handle the transportation requirements with social distancing. So right now our district's plan is to keep a maximum of 2 students per seat, and students be required to wear a face mask during transportation to and from school. There will be some other discussions later about how those buses will be, sanitized, disinfected, and cleaned. But 2 students per seat, and students will be required to wear a mask. In addition to this, one of the things that's really important for us as a district moving forward is to get a real accurate number of the students who are going to be using district transportation on a daily basis. So posted on our website this evening, in addition to this presentation and a question form, is the transportation opt-out form that can be filled out by any family. What that allows the district to do is for families who traditionally either transport their kid to and from school or plan to do it considering the circumstances, are able to let the district or make the district aware of that circumstance now, so that we can better plan for the spacing of students on the buses at the start of the school year on August 31st. That transportation form, as I mentioned, is on the district website. It can be filled out at any time. When a parent needs to regain or restart that access to school district transportation, please let us know, and we will make sure that that happens in a timely fashion. At this point, we've finished the presentation on scheduling and social distancing protocols, and I'm now going to turn it over to Mrs. Trinkle for discussion on monitoring student and staff health.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Cupp. My name is Karen Trinkle, and I'm the Director of Student and Community Services. I will be focusing on monitoring student and staff health. The pandemic team fully recognizes the concerns of our students, our parents, and our staff. The pandemic team recognizes that this situation has created an emotional response in all of us. We're experiencing and acknowledging that is so important. The upcoming slides will focus on the district's effort to create a framework to establish a procedure and a protocol for monitoring student staff health. The pandemic team has remained in constant communication and contact with members of the Pennsylvania Department of Health for our guidance and direction. The pandemic team has also maintained frequent and regular communication with our school district physician to share and review procedures and protocols. Remember that our school district is not expected to screen our students or staff to identify cases of COVID-19. If a school has a case of COVID-19, local health officials will help identify those individuals and will follow up on the next steps for the district to take. Again, the school district and members of the pandemic team lead and remain in constant communication with PA, Department of Health, and our district physician to make recommendations and adhere to guidelines for student and staff safety first and foremost. This has allowed for the creation of established guidelines for best practices in use of face masks or covering and hand washing. The constant communication with our nursing department has been paramount. We've been using guidance from the National School Nursing Association and have provided reassurance and structured expectations for our pandemic team to provide accurate information and educational tools for staff and students and families. Examples of this will include hand washing, how to wear a face mask or face covering, and adherence to social distancing guidelines. You can to the next slide, please. With the support of the Pennsylvania Department of Health and our district physician within the CDC protocols, we've been given the information we need based on the information we have currently to develop a process to address student and staff exposure to COVID-19 with no symptoms, a diagnosis of COVID-19 and having symptoms, and just exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19. This table will provide detailed steps of what district staff and official personnel will need to do in either of those three situations. As a reminder, schools are subject to CDC and Pennsylvania Department of Health guidelines and will establish and maintain communication with these local and state health officials regarding COVID-19, regarding symptoms, preventative measures, staying home when sick, good hygiene, and school district specific protocols. The Pennsylvania Department of Health and the school district physician will be guiding district personnel with contact tracing and district-wide steps to respond. You can move to the next one. 3 tools have been created in consultation with the Pennsylvania Department of Health and our school district physician. These tools will focus on both student and staff health and safety. A Google form has been created for post-COVID-19 symptoms and will be utilized to help reduce transmission. The return to work, to school and work monitoring tool was created by our school district nursing team to monitor and track symptoms of COVID-19. The athletic department and the Easton Area High School band has also created tracking tools that help us troubleshoot and create a monitoring system
Custodial staff will be following cleaning and disinfection procedures that are based on CDC recommendations and guidelines. We're also basing our cleaning procedures on best practice methods and guidance from PDE. Protocols are broken down into phases according to color and phase. As you can see on the slide, red and yellow phases, students will be working remotely. Buildings will be closed to students and professional staff. The custodial team will be sanitizing all surfaces in the red and yellow phases. This will be a room-by-room deep clean. This will include, but not limited to, walls, floors, furniture, and equipment. Moving into green phase 1 and green phase 2, staff will increase frequency of cleaning of high-touch surfaces on a daily basis. Day shift staff will routinely clean those high-touch areas throughout the school day. This will include, but not limited to, doorknobs, handrails, light switches, bathrooms, and points of entry. All custodial staff in phase 1 and 2 will be given additional working hours to complete those tasks, in addition to their daily cleaning. Staff at the middle school and high school will be completing a deep cleaning of our buildings on Wednesdays, in accordance to phase 2. If we are in green phase 1, staff at the elementary schools and the high school and middle school will also be deep cleaning the rooms on those Wednesdays. Green phase 3 and green phase 4, staff will do their general cleaning with focusing on disinfecting those high-touch areas during their daily cleaning. We are also looking at the HVAC systems in all of our facilities. The maintenance staff will be adjusting the outside air dampers on all building mechanical equipment to allow as much outside air in as possible. Staff will also be encouraged to open windows, if possible, depending on their location, weather, and room conditions, is to allow as much outside air in our rooms as we can. Air purification systems will be placed in the health rooms and designated isolation spaces. Move to the next slide. Next, I'll be reviewing our cleaning and disinfecting in our transportation department. Procedures are also based on CDC and Department of Health guidelines. These are also broken into color-coded phase and by phase and color. Transportation operations in the red and yellow phases will be suspended since students will be operating remotely. Bus and van interior surfaces will be cleaned and disinfected. This will include, but not limited to, floors, walls, seats, handrails, driver controls. This will essentially be a deep cleaning of our buses. In phase 1 and phase 2, all buses and vans will be disinfected on a daily basis, in addition to the general cleaning that is completed by the drivers. Buses and vans will be disinfected in the evenings. Drivers will complete spot disinfecting between each run during the day. Spot cleaning during the day will focus on those high-touch areas, such as handrails, seat backs, and points of entry to those vehicles. In green phase 3 and green phase 4, all buses and vans will be disinfected in addition to the general cleaning by the drivers. Buses and vans will be disinfected again in the evening. In green phase 4, in addition to the disinfecting, general routine cleaning will be completed by the drivers. We will also be including hand sanitizer on our buses for student and driver use. This will be for entrance and exit of the vehicle. We will also be providing personal protective equipment, PPE, to our staff. Neck gaiters or buffs will be provided for all staff members.
able to remove their masks during eating, drinking, mask breaks, or when 6 feet of social distancing is able. We are also going to install signage throughout our buildings. The signage will be based on CDC information, will be printed, labeled, and it will be installed throughout our buildings. It will be in both English and Spanish. Signage will include items that highlight hand washing, hand sanitizing, wearing of masks, and social distancing guidelines. We will also install social distancing floor stickers throughout our cafeteria and potential spots for students and visitors who congregate in areas throughout our buildings. We will be modifying our facilities in several ways. We will be installing tempered glass social distancing doors in our main offices. Plexiglass shields will be installed at visitor receiving areas throughout our buildings. We will also be creating checklists that will be installed and placed on doors to each room in our building to note the cleaning schedule and the completion of cleaning and all cleaning tasks. Hand sanitizing stations will be placed throughout our buildings. They will be located in hallways and high occupancy areas such as gyms, cafeterias, and entrances. We will also have hand sanitizer available in each classroom. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I believe I'll be turning a presentation over to Dr. Burris.
Next slide, please. The Professional Development Committee identified a number of trainings and webinars for staff related specifically to the COVID-19 virus. Additional trainings are being developed related to instructional delivery. These specific titles to these trainings will be listed in the final plan document presented to the board. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Josh Ladd. I am the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. And what I wanted to begin saying tonight was that the administrative team and the planning team fully recognize that there is no perfect option for every single family. And we realize that. But we do believe that we want to provide the families as much notification and information so that they have time to plan and to react to the plan that we set forth. We realize it will affect every family in a different way as well. With that being said, we have recently seen an increase in inquiries in regard to our own in-house virtual academy or our cyber academy. It's a full-time online learning option, K through 12. It has a parallel curriculum, so it mirrors what our students are doing in the brick and mortar. So one of the things that we wanted to bring to everyone's attention is, should you wish to consider that option or have questions, we encourage you to reach out to that department. The information can be found on our home webpage, and you can access the website and request info to our director, Mr. Cron. Obviously, we may see an increase in inquiries because of the time that we're living in. We ask for your patience, but we will do our best to respond within 2 or 3 days. And there will be an upcoming orientation session for students. And as we progress through this process, we will be sure to effectively communicate that with the community and students. And you can go to the next slide, please. So there were a few things tonight that we wanted to accomplish. With every question, there has more questions that arise. But what we wanted to accomplish tonight was to provide a framework for everyone on this Zoom session tonight that, as Mr. Piccarato mentioned earlier, that balances the mitigation efforts and also puts a focus on education as well. And how do we balance that to the best of our ability? I will say, I am rather new to the district, and I want to say thank you to the planning team and the stakeholders and everyone offering want to ensure a smooth transition back to a brick and mortar learning environment as quickly as possible, but with safety as a paramount piece. So in regard to questions from the community and from parents, we do have a process in place for those questions and comments, and it's been established. So we have put a link on the homepage. It's a Google link, and it's a link to a form posted with information that we're going to require from you. So we're going to request what level that your student is at, and also what topic you're curious on hearing more information on. So we will do our very best to get back to you in a timely fashion. Some of the information that you as a parent or student or community member, staff member, may want to put into that Google form may be just some things that help us drive our discussion. They may be some things that we need to be more specific on a more granular level while planning. And we may need to get back to a majority of people with clear and accurate information. I would ask, though, that if you have a specific question in regard to one specific student, either give us a little bit of time to work through some more of those granular level questions. But as we move forward in the next week or two, we would encourage you to contact the building level administration if it's a specific question in regard to a student, as opposed to something more a little larger and more common. So that is a process we have for questions after tonight. That is already posted on the homepage. And I also want to share with everyone that the presentation was recorded tonight. It is accessible via YouTube, and you can access that through the board docs page of our website. And also, the presentation itself is also linked on our homepage as well. So with all that being said, I just want to say thank you to the planning team and all of the stakeholders who provided feedback. It's a great return on all the questions that we sent out. And Mr. Piparato, I would like to then end this referring us back to you if you have anything else to say.
Thank you, Mr. Ziatic. I have the distinct pleasure this evening of informing the community that we are having some technical difficulties with YouTube. And I know that it's caused great frustration on the part of many members of our community, and it may indeed impact the recording. So I would refer everybody to the actual presentation itself, the PowerPoint presentation that we provided you this evening that will be linked to the website. I also know that there are many questions, probably more generated out of this presentation than you even had before the presentation. Please understand that it just would not be practical to try to field all those questions at this time. It doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. It doesn't mean that we won't answer those questions as quickly as possible. As you can imagine, there will be a flood of questions coming in tonight, tomorrow, over the weekend, I'm sure, and we will get to them just as quickly as we can and as accurately as we can. As we've repeated over the course of the presentation, today being July 16th, we have a target in mind. But we also know that we've got to pay attention to you, the community, and to the pandemic itself before we can make some final decisions about what August 31st is going to look like. We're going to do that in as timely a manner as possible without rushing the decision. So that will, too, bring about frustration on the part of parents, and I get that. We don't want to be making decisions now that we're going to have to change anyway at the last minute. So hang in there, be patient with us. We will try to be on top of keeping you informed as much as possible. And when we all are able to make a final decision, we'll try to give you as much advance notice as possible. I think it would be prudent for parents of young children to have daycare or child care arranged in the event that we have to go remote, even at the elementary level. And judging by what we're hearing from the governor, that's a very real possibility. So my advice would be, do your best to try to arrange that ahead of time. I know that's a very difficult task. And I don't say that lightly. Having said that, I'd like to conclude tonight's presentation by thanking all the members of the pandemic team, some of whom you've met tonight, many who've been working behind the scenes you did not meet, especially our school nurses who are phenomenal. We're doing the best we can. We know that there's no way to make everybody happy. But most importantly, we want you to know that we remain committed to your children. We remain committed to our teachers who are viewing, our staff members who are viewing, and we're going to make decisions based on what we believe is best for all of you. So at this time, Mr. Shando, I don't know if you're unmuted, but I will know Mr. Shannon would be very positive. He would express his thanks to the committee because he always does. And I know